all the characters in the Watchmen, we know the least about the comedian. He dies in the first scene and is only revealed to us through the memories and accounts of others. He's a walking contradiction. A man that is monstrous enough to attempt a rape, and somehow loving and repentive enough to have a child with that very same woman.
Guy tries to rape you, and years later you let him finish the job? What? Were you drunk or just smoking?
Am I ever gonna live this down?
He works for the government, but as far as his politics goes, he's more in line with the anarchist Max Steiner than Republican President Richard Nixon, the man he works for. He's portrayed as an egoist that rejects great ideas, good cause, a doctrine, a system, or a lofty calling. When he fights rioters, he's not protecting the state. He's quote-unquote living himself out, not caring how well or ill humanity may fare thereby. At first, it's easy to paint the comedian as an immoral agent, as an egoist, anarchist, and hedonist, someone that does what brings them pleasure and avoids what doesn't. But that's looking at him through the wrong lens. He's met Dr. Manhattan, the closest thing to God, and watched it become an indifferent puppet of this state.
The most powerful thing in the universe, still just a puppet.
It stood by and watched him murder a pregnant woman rather than intervene.
You could have turned the gun into steam, the bullets into mercury, the bottle into goddamn snowflakes, but you didn't, did you? You really don't give a damn about human beings. You're drifting out of touch, Doc. God help us all.
He's not immoral, just amoral. Morals don't factor into a life without meaning. This belief in life's ultimate lack of meaning is known as nihilism. But if the comedian were a complete nihilist, someone who finds no intrinsic value in life, I don't think he would have been so troubled by Ozymandias' plan. There are still some times when he attempts to find meaning in his life through connections with others, like his attempt to connect with his estranged daughter, Laurie Jupiter. This search for meaning in a meaningless world is a philosophical concept known as the absurd. I'd argue that the comedian is emblematic of the absurd. This is what makes an otherwise monstrous character sympathetic. He finds humor in the horrifying lengths humanity will go to find meaning. He sees the awful truth of freedom. Or as Jean-Paul Sartre put it, man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does.
What happened to the American dream? What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
Like any good absurdist, he embraces this philosophical contradiction of man's search for meaning in a meaningless world. He wears it on him at all times. Existence is a joke, and death is the punchline.
Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Curtains.
But there's a joke that even he doesn't find all that funny. In his final days, he attempts to connect with Moloch, a former nemesis. This is the most revealing moment of the comedian. Here we see a broken man attempting to reconcile the horror of Ozymandias' plan with his philosophy. A comedian seeking intrinsic meaning in an otherwise meaningless world.
I mean, what's funny? What's so goddamn funny? I don't get it. Somebody explain. Somebody explain it to me.
I am trying to give a name to the force that set them in motion.
Teleology is antithetical to everything I've discussed so far. It's the idea that everything in the universe moves toward a built-in or intrinsic purpose. For instance, it is the intrinsic purpose of an acorn to become an oak tree. It could be argued that it is the intrinsic purpose of John Osterman to become Dr. Manhattan. It could also be argued that John's intrinsic purpose was stripped from him in the intrinsic field subtractor, and that he became a deus ex machina, a god outside the machine.
I'm just the puppet who can see the strings.
an indifferent observer of humanity's fate, a being removed from the idea of purpose and meaning, an omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent
My red
nihilist.
world here means more to me than your blue one. I will show you around it if you wish.
But it's hard to discuss the ethics or philosophy of Dr. Manhattan because they're human subjects, and Dr. Manhattan isn't human. Not entirely, anyhow. When he was a teenager, he studied his father's trade of watchmaker until his father pushed him to pursue a future in nuclear energy. This upbringing leads him to look at the world through an almost mechanistic lens. Even in his regeneration, he likens his biology to reassembling the parts of a watch in correct sequence.
There's a circulatory system walking through the kitchen. November 14th. Really, it's just a question of reassembling the components in the correct sequence.
Mechanism refers to the ancient philosophy linked with the atomists, which argued that the universe is reducible to completely mechanical principles of motion and colliding matter.
Perhaps nothing is made. Perhaps it simply is, has been, will always be there. A clock without a craft.
Highly determinist by nature. When the mechanist thesis is stated aloud, it seems to describe exactly how Dr. Manhattan sees the world. We may regard the present state of the universe as the effect of the past and the cause of the future. An intellect, which at any given moment knew all the forces that animate nature, and the mutual positions of the beings that compose it, if this intellect were vast enough to submit that data to analysis, could condense into a single formula the movement of the greatest bodies of the universe and that of the lightest atom. For such an intellect, nothing could be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes.
Time is simultaneous, an intricately structured jewel that humans insist on viewing one edge at a time.
To Manhattan, the world is a predictable, boring machine. It's only when he's bombarded by tachyons late in the story that he remembers the excitement of uncertainty.
Not tachyons, surely. Yes, definitely. A squall of tachyons. Where can they be coming from? I'd almost forgotten the excitement of not knowing, the delights of uncertainty.
It's easy to see how his certainty in everything else gives him a nihilist opinion of the world. It's hard to care about the world when you see it as nothing more than a spherical clock, ticking away. But I feel that as the story unfolds, Dr. Manhattan experiences an arc from nihilist to existentialist.
My life is just one big joke.
I don't think your life is a joke.
But before I can get into discussing existentialism, I think it's important to frame it in contrast to an older philosophy that it stands in opposition of, essentialism, the idea that one's essence or soul precedes their existence.
I'm a good leader. I'm a Libra.
To essentialists, the soul precedes the body, whereas existentialists like the aforementioned Sartre believe that the soul or essence is shaped through our experiences. Just as John's existence literally precedes Dr. Manhattan's essence.
John?
Existentialism is a sort of response to complete nihilism. It understands that the universe is meaningless, but it proposes that we must all find what gives our lives meaning, and pursue it passionately and with sincerity. It is about being authentic to the essence formed in us through a life lived, rather than some arbitrary essence or soul supposedly given to us before our birth.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
When Manhattan isolates himself on that red planet, he's in search of that one thing that gives life meaning. And I mean all life, because after he finds his one tether to the world with another man, he seriously considers whether human life has any value.
See what that means? Don't you see the futility of asking me to save a world that I no longer have any stake in?
It takes a human experience to shift his nihilistic perspective into one of existentialism. In particular, it takes the truth of Laurie Jupiter's conception to change his mind. There on Mars, she comes to terms with the long-denied fact that her father is the comedian. It's only when Manhattan ponders the thermodynamic miracle of her creation that he realizes life is a meaningful miracle worth preserving.
I changed my mind. But why? Thermodynamic miracles. Events with odds against, so astronomical they're effectively impossible, like oxygen spontaneously becoming gold. I long to observe such a thing, and yet in each human coupling, 1,000 million sperm vie for a single egg. Multiply those odds by countless generations against the odds of your ancestors being alive, meeting, siring this precise son, that exact daughter, until your mother loves a man she has every reason to hate, and of that union, of the 1,000 million children competing for fertilization, it was you, only you, that emerged. To distill so specific a form from that chaos of improbability, like turning air to gold, that is the crowning unlikelihood, the thermodynamic miracle. But if my birth, if that's a thermodynamic miracle, I mean, you could say that about anybody in the world. Yes, anybody in the world. But the world is so full of people, so crowded with these miracles that they become commonplace, and we forget. I forget. We gaze continually at the world and it grows dull in our perceptions, yet seen from another's vantage point, as if new, it may still take the breath away. Come, dry your eyes, for you are life, rarer than a quark, and unpredictable beyond the dreams of Heisenberg, the clay in which the forces that shape all things leave their fingerprints most clearly.
It seems his line about fingerprints implies that the miracle of life is evidence of a divine craftsman to the universe, but I'll let you make of that what you will. Either way, Manhattan's essence is shaped through his conversation with Jupiter, and he rediscovers meaning in life, so much so that at the end of the comic book and adaptation, he abandons Earth to create his own.
I thought you said you cared about life again.
I do. I think maybe I'll create some. Goodbye, Laurie.